you're just going to explain where you think you won this ward, because it might not, this constituency, because it might not be quite the story that's getting out there at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, you've got three big parts of the Rochester and Strood constituency. Rochester itself, Strood on this side of the river, and then the peninsula, which is a vast area and relatively sparsely populated. Rochester, very much the strong Conservative voting area. We had a tough day there yesterday. Really? We had a tough day. I mean, of course we were getting votes there. We had a tough day.
That was the kitchen sink was thrown there.
Well, the kitchen sink was thrown everywhere, but we certainly felt there that the Conservatives were holding on to their vote. And we were actually, I mean, we were up against the most massive machine. I mean, letters from the Prime Minister, masses of telephone calls being made from America, all sorts of things going on. And yesterday they had over 1,000 people out on the ground. So, you know, in Rochester, the Conservative vote held up incredibly strongly.
More than Clacton?
Yes, more than Clacton.
Okay.
More than Clacton. Strood, traditionally very strong Labour. We did very well there, and we pretty comfortably topped the poll.
In a sense, would you say you won it in Strood rather than Rochester?
I think the key to this election for us was picking up a large chunk of Labour votes, and we did that. You know, the numbers prove that. So that was really important.
No, but when you go there, these are voters that maybe believe in the Labour message on cuts, on the cost of living crisis. And they're going to you and voting for a former Conservative who voted for
Well, I mean, but don't forget that you're talking here about people who've had their wages compressed. You're talking here about people who have seen their community change in a huge way in the course of the last 10 years. You're talking here about people who are decent British people, but who are very upset at the negative impact mass immigration has had on their lives, and they see us as the only party prepared to stand up and champion their cause.
And this is where the flags were as well.
This is where the crosses and Georges were, and there was great anger. So we definitely did very well there, and equally out on the peninsula, we did pretty well there. Generally Conservative voting, but not as wealthy, perhaps, as the Conservative voters in Rochester itself.
So you think that this underlines, whilst it's 3,000 majority, 7%. The Conservatives are arguing we're just going to win it back at the general election. This pattern might underline why you think it's going to be a bit stickier for you than they would.
I think the Conservatives, and to be honest with you, much of the media have thought of UKIP as we take Conservative votes, and that's the battle. It isn't at all. We take our votes from across the board. We picked up a big chunk of Labour votes in this by-election yesterday, and interestingly, we also picked up a chunk of voters who haven't voted for anybody for 20 years. So, the UKIP dynamic is we pick up seats across the board, and where that translates to the next general election is basically the more marginal the seat, the better chance UKIP's got.
OK, just a bit of North Kent is shown here. Where else do you think you have a chance at the general election, or via obviously your modus operandi so far has been via defection.
Yes.
I mean, you're going to be standing in South Thanet, which is a bit off this graph. It's a different thing, isn't it, just from a standing start without having that defection?
I think having won in Rochester and Strood, when the Conservatives and everybody said we wouldn't, and that Reckless had made a terrible mistake, I think this changes the whole dynamic. And I now genuinely believe today there are a good number of seats in Kent where we can potentially win next year.
And defectors, we see that Philip Hollowbone was chaperoning Mark Reckless into Parliament today.
Yeah, I know. Michael Gove has said today he's 100% certain there will be no more defectors. Personally, I would be very surprised if there weren't more defectors between now and the election.
You talked about this sophisticated Conservative machine that was phoning from America. You're doing the same thing.